Hello everyone, JamieStarr here for the New World News Network. On this episode, I wanted to get into some of the aspects of the latest Purge movie that I thought were very interesting. And I actually just ran through this whole thing without my camera on, so I'm doing this for a second time. So forgive me if I try to speed through this, but I've just, already did this. And so the movie is following on the heels of the previous Purge movies. I assume if you're watching this, you already know what the premise is. There's a 24-hour time period where all crime is legal, and they rationalize it as this being a pacification of human nature and the desire to harm one another by just letting all hell break loose for a night. In the second movie, it is put forth that this is actually a way that the rich and the elite are trying to cull the lower classes. And this movie goes even more into a political angle with all of this. I pulled a couple screenshots that I thought were very telling. First thing to note about the movie is there's no real hero. The hero is the female presidential candidate. Everyone else is sort of an anti-hero. You have this cast of characters from The Shop. Black guy who's a reformed gang member. The Hispanic guy who's immigrated to America and claims in his home country he did what he had to do in order to survive, which you learn part of that is he's a really good shot with a gun. And you have this woman who I guess partook in previous Purge nights, but since now runs a underground triage unit helping people with medical issues, sort of paying for her sins. You can see we got pictures of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King back here, so there's lots of political side bits sort of just slid in there. Like most of these dystopic future movies coming out, again, the female presidential candidate, we see this on Hunger Games, Elysium, lots of these movies. So, the female candidate is being protected by the white guy with the black hair from the previous movie because they have faith that she will end the Purge if elected. You see part of her security detail being taken out and compromised by this white nationalist group. Here you can see they have white power stickers on them, or patches, Nazi symbols, skull and bones, the crosses, the cross of Malta, I believe, swastikas. So it sets up this narrative where you end up with the presidential candidate being taken in by that group at the store. Again, a bunch of different minority groups, all with shady backgrounds, are protecting this female presidential candidate. At some point, after being hunted, tracked, and followed, she ends up at this underground triage center where there is sort of a army, like a black militia, basically looking to take out the presidential candidate so she can be elected. She tries to tell them, we don't have to do it this way. I can win in an election fair and square. And next thing you know, the woman ends up kidnapped and brought into this church, where this is where it gets really crazy. Because again, if we're dealing with this on a level of archetypes and narratives, you have all of these minorities that are helping the white female president get to office, and the people that are opposing her and going after her, now they've brought in Christianity into this white nationalist group. So it's the stereotype of the Republican, the bigoted Christian and the, white supremacist and everything like that. So you see them also wearing the this sort of royal symbols as if they're in a fraternal order like Masonry or something like that. And as they're about to sacrifice the woman in the church, she of course is saved by the group of mercenaries, the people from the shop and everything like that. You also have this scene at the end where the one skinhead guy is taken down by the guy from the original movie. A handful of them end up dying. The Hispanic guy ends up being given the shop at the end, and the woman ends up in office. So I think this is all important because when things like this come out, we have these sort of predictive programming aspects where certain things are put in front of our eyes. Anyone can Google the things about 9/11 in movies and TV before it happened. So we basically have it with the premise in this movie laid out that if a white nationalist or some sort of skinhead were to take a shot at Hillary Clinton, you'd have this familiarity to the concept of a white nationalist going after a female presidential candidate. if that were to happen, and then you have a group of minorities coming to back her, again, this concept, this narrative is already put out there. So if it comes into reality, then it won't be as surprising to everyone. And this is where I think things get very dangerous, because as I've been saying lately, more and more I conversate with people about issues, and I see them pointing to bits in movies more than actual fact. They're more comfortable citing 12 years of being 12 years a slave or roots or something like that than actual history and stuff like that that we know, because it puts forth an emotional narrative. You know, they've seen this. It's not just data on a paper. And it gets very dangerous because it dilutes what we're talking about. I had talked to someone recently about slavery, and a handful of her points were, well, whatever city has the most slaves will be doing best, and, you know, when people set up shop and everything like that. And she doesn't realize in those days you went to the market. People were traveling. It was like how farmers markets operate, basically, where people with their farms would then congregate at one place for a day or two, sell their goods, and then go back home. You also didn't have mega cities. Again, we're talking people with acres of land. Your nearest neighbor, you might have to hop on a horse just to get to their house. So it dilutes the conversation when we're trying to take historical things and bring it into modern context. But it's, again, because we can't keep straight the realities and the depictions we see in TV. It gets very dangerous when, you know, they worry about, oh, well, this needs to be represented this way in a movie, and this needs to be represented like that. You had in the Iron Man movies, China threw a hissy fit about Mandarin being portrayed as an Asian. That's why he was put forth as a pseudo Bin Laden character. So lots of things are problematic, but it's none of the things that the left wants to talk about. But sorry if I spoiled this movie for anyone, but those are just a few of the narratives and the archetypes and the stereotypes being put forth in this movie that I thought were very interesting and that I wanted to address. I really didn't think it was going to have this sort of white nationalist, pseudo-Christian sacrifice theme running through it, but it did, so I figured I would point that out to everyone. So, hope everyone enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel if you like my content, and have a good one, everyone.